The Archangel Chronicles 2 by Raymond, copyright 2024. Chapter 2, The Periplus. Honorius stood on the raised stern platform of the Minerva beside Strabo and Sophia, flanking Nicanor, who was seated in the master's chair. It was a fair morning, and the monsoon winds filled the sails, pushing the ship smartly over the swells. The following sea nudged the sturdy vessel ahead, bobbing over the waves rhythmically, like a horse on a downhill gallop. Strabo unrolled a scroll, his eyes following the Greek text, lips mouthing the words to himself. "We must be getting close, perhaps within a day," said Nicanor with a nod. He took a deep breath and sniffed the air. "I smell land, and the color of the water has changed. We are near the outlet of a great river. See how we are now visited by birds we have not seen before. My men have sounded the depths. The water is shallower, with a silty sand bottom." "Well, on my first journey to these lands, Master Nicanor, it took us many months of sailing and rowing, hugging the coastline. But this time we have come across open seas in a straight line," said Honorius. "Aye, Dominus," said Nicanor. "The winds have been fair indeed. Our journey has lasted a little longer than a fortnight. Who would have thought that this could be done? We should have sailed off the edge of the earth by now, according to my father." Strabo piped in. "The Periplus and records from the Great Library told us that this could be done, Master Nicanor. And our celestial navigatrix, my Lady Sophia, has kept us on course with her astrolabes and calculations." He turned and bowed his head to Sophia. "Master Strabo, you are kind, and you are right about the Periplus. Tell us, learned one, what it will be like where we land." Strabo squinted in the sunlight and began reading from the Periplus. "The Indus has several mouths, very shallow and marshy, so that they are not all navigable, except the one in the middle, at which, by the shore, is the market town Barbaricum. Before it there lies a small island, and inland behind it is the royal metropolis of Menagara. It is subject to the Parthian princes, who take turns driving each other out." Strabo looked up from the scroll, white eyebrows twitching. "Of course, this information is old. This document was written close to 100 years ago. Much may have changed since then." "Read on, Master Strabo," said Honorius. Ships slide anchor at Barbaricum. Their cargoes are carried up to the metropolis of Minagara, by river, to the great king. Textiles of all kinds, including silks and linen, topaz, coral, frankincense, vessels made of the finest glass, gold plate are imported there. Exotic plants, expensive resins, aromatic oils, turquoise, lapis lazuli, exotic animal skins, cotton, silk cloth, yarns, and indigo are exported on the return trip down the great river. Whilst Strabo was reciting the contents of the Periplus, Callias joined the group, saluting to Honorius, who returned the greeting. "Huh," said Honorius. "These observations may be good for a trader, but they are woefully inadequate to plan a naval campaign. We know so little about where we are going. Are there fortifications at the city of Barbaricum? Are there pirate ships based there? Where can we offload our own cargoes? Will we be welcome? We are sailing into uncertainty, gentlemen, and I do not like it." "True, Dominus, but we also have the element of surprise. That may be worth something, surely," said Callias. Honorius began pacing toward the stern, hands behind his back. The group was silent as all eyes were upon him. He stood for a few minutes, the wind billowing his purple military cloak behind him. Suddenly, he turned and marched back across the deck to join the group. "Right, Tribune and Master Nicanor, here is the plan. We will hoist a signal to the following ships to close the distance between us to no more than a bowshot. Nicanor, you will ensure that every inch of sail is run out. The corbetas will sail in a single line right into the port. The Minerva will lead the way. All decks will be cleared. The cohort in each ship will be brought out, fully armed on deck. That gives us 80 legionnaires on each ship, ready to repel any boarders. The battle towers will be erected on the rear deck. 6 of our best archers, armed with fire arrows at the ready, shall be in the towers. They must be ready to unleash ordinary arrows or fire arrows at our signal." Honorius turned to Callias. "Tribune, have you seen to the oil pots?" Callias saluted. "Aye, Dominus. They will be brought out on deck, and the ballista crew will be ready to send the pots and bolts at your signal." Callias turned toward the bow and raised his hand. 6 centurions stepped forward, snapping to attention before Honorius. Each lifted an arm in salute. "Ave Caesar! Ave Honorius!" they shouted in unison. "Aye, lads," said Honorius, stopping before each of them, placing his hands on their shoulders one by one. "Now, my boys, you shall see the fruits of those many weeks of training you inflicted upon your men before we sailed. Now we shall see how well you have taught them. Gentlemen, we are sailing into unknown dangers. We do not know whether pirates who infest these waters will intercept this first contingent of sailing ships. We do not know whether those who control the port will welcome or attack us. This enterprise will turn upon the slightest of margins, the boldness of our actions, and the valor of our crews." Honorius stepped before an impressive centurion. "Optio Marcus Silvo, do you think we can pull this off? Can we sail through a battle line of triremes and come out without a scratch? What say you?" Silvo stepped forward, arm across his chest. "Fortes fortuna adjuviat Dominus," he shouted and bowed his head. Honorius stepped in front of the centurion standing to his far left. "And you, Flavius Spendius, have you offered sacrifices to Fortuna?" Spendius stepped forward, hand across his chest. "Aye, Dominus, at dawn, and the goddess smiles upon us this day." "And you, Tormentorium Ducum Albius Attilus, what will be your part in delivering our victory?" Attilas, the artillery officer, stepped forward smartly, arm across his chest, and bowed his head. "The ballistae will be ready to throw the oil pots, unlit, Dominus. At your signal, they will be sent at any ships in our way. The pots have been tested and will shatter on impact, coating any gallery within range with the substance." "And where will you aim your scorpion stingers?" asked Honorius. "At their steersmen, at their navius." Honorius now went to the centurion on the far right of the line. "And you, Altium Balbus, Magister Sagittarium, where will you aim your arrows?" Balbus stepped forward smartly and raised an arm in salute. "After the scorpions cast their bolts at the helmsman, the archers will volley at anyone else on deck to clear it. At the second signal, they will light their fire arrows and ignite the splashed oil decks from the clay pots. When the oil ignites, the water will not extinguish it." Honorius nodded. "Aye, my lads. Now, this is the most difficult task. Do not light your arrows until the signal, and make sure your aim is true. All depends upon it. No accidents, no fires on our ship." Honorius stood, feet apart, fists clenched, arms bent at the elbow, and close to his sides in a martial stance. "And tell me, my lads, what do the rest of the cohort do?" All 6 centurions answered in unison. "Protect the helmsman, protect the master navius with our shields, repel any boarders with our spears." "Well done, lads," exclaimed Honorius, nodding to Callias. "You train them well, Tribune. Let each of us do our duty and depend upon our mates to do theirs." Honorius discharged the officers, and each of them went to their own contingent. The ship became a hive of activity as the clay pots full of a witch's brew of pitch, quicklime, sulfur, naphtha, and oil were brought on deck and carefully stored near the ballistae, ready for use. All through the morning, Nicanor's keen eyes scanned the horizon. He breathed the air. He looked at the birds who began to appear in larger numbers, flying about the ship. Weighted jars attached to long lines were thrown overboard, retrieved and brought up to him, to be poured out into basins. He dipped his hands into the water and grabbed handfuls of mud. He felt and smelled the mixture. Nicanor looked to Honorius, Callias, and Strabo, smiling. "We are very close to land, my friends. We are at the mouth of the great river. See how the colors of the waters have now changed again. See how they have turned much lighter. See how the eels are coming from the depths and are swimming round us." Just then, the watchman standing on the crow's nest at the top of the mainmast shouted, "Master Navius, land ahead on the port beam." "Keep a sharp eye to the north and south for sails," commanded Honorius. The command was passed along the deck. Dozens of eyes scanned the horizon. All the while, a fair wind propelled the Minerva swiftly over a following sea. "It will be difficult for any galleys to navigate these swells, Dominus," said Nicanor. "We are favored by Neptune. These winds will blow us straight into shore." Another call from the crow's nest. "3 sails on the starboard beam!" Nicanor sprang to his feet and stared to where the watchman was pointing. 3 ships. They are on course to intercept us," he said, "but they have the wind against them." For 2 hours we continued. The line of the distant shore grew sharper and larger until it filled the entire horizon. We could make out details of trees, hills, and a bay. There were many mouths to the great river, but the middle one was the largest. We set course straight towards it. The sails at the horizon grew over the hours into 3 galleys approaching under sail. For a long time we saw them tacking upwind, trying to close the distance with us. "Look," said Callias, "they are furling sail, and see how they are now running out their oars. They will be pulling obliquely upwind. One of them is a large trireme. The other are two smaller biremes. They're pulling hard and close hauled to the wind. Though they will close with us under oars, it will not be easy for them. See? They're beginning to pick up some speed to intercept us, said Nicanor. Good, shouted Honorius, eyes fixed on the ships closing the distance. The wind freshened, and the Minerva ran with it, every inch of billowing sail deployed, mounting the swells and throwing up a frothy spray. The line of ships behind the Minerva tightened up their distance until each of the Roman ships was a bow shot apart. Beat the alarm! Call out the cohort! Hoist the signals! Make ready the artillery! Shouted Honorius. His commands were repeated down the chain of command. The Minerva ran up the signals from its halyards. Each ship in line ran up their signals in answer. Acknowledged! Shouted Callias. Honorius turned to me and Sophia. My ladies, now it is time for you to take shelter below. Soon this deck will bristle with arrows and spears. Sophia and I climbed down the stairs. Exiting the elevated rear deck, we found a place below the overhanging upper deck on another platform near the stern where we could watch. We embraced each other. The drums beat out a cadence, and the Minerva's contingent of legionnaires, 80 strong, all armed with shields, javelins, slings, and 10 darts, affixed to the inside of each shield, lined the decks. The three opposing galleys were sprinting obliquely against the wind, their banks of oars rising, falling, and biting into the swell like legs on angry centipedes. Their prows parted the oncoming waves, throwing up sheets of spray mast high as the lumbering galleys worked upwind until they formed a line, blocking our path into the central river channel. There they stopped and periodically moved their oars in unison, marking time. Thus, they maintained their station, waiting for us to fall upon their prows. The trireme in the center, observed Honorius. She is a large warship. I'd say 36 oars to a side. Aye, Dominus, but with our Minerva's stout high hulls, we still overtop her, said Nicanor. Aye, Master Navius, but they'll try to stop us. If they can maneuver to intercept us head-on, they'll threaten to ram and then try to board us. But they won't be expecting us to be armed to the teeth with a century of legionnaires and artillery, said Callias. Honorius turned to face the soldiers now crowded on deck. Callias, have Optio Silvo come forward. We should make some last-minute adjustments to the plan. Word was sent forth to the Optio, who hurried to the stern, saluted, breathing hard with the effort. Silvo, are you ready with the artillery? Aye, Dominus, came the reply. Look here, Optio, Honorius pointed to the line of ships maneuvering to block the Minerva's path. We go between that trireme and the other two smaller galleys there. Put your best marksmen on the Scorpios. Have them aim their bolts at the trireme steersmen, see? Those exposed on their stern deck. They will not be expecting an merchant ship, but all depends upon your marksmanship. Fire a volley of bolts and take out those steersmen. Do not fail. Callias! Honorius motioned for the tribune to join him in the Optio. He pointed to another spot on the trireme. See there, have your archers in the tower aim their first volley at the pilot, the Navius. Do you see him? Yes, Dominus, came the answer. Optio, on my command, let loose the ballistae and send the clay pots to smash on her deck. Callias, Honorius motioned, at my signal, have your archers aim their next volley of fire arrows after we pass by. Ignite the pitch and oil, but you must wait for my signal when we are clear. Do you understand? Pay attention now. Do not loose the first fire arrows until my signal. Callias nodded. Aye, Dominus, and saluted, arm extended. "Go now, and may Fortuna favor us." "Hail Caesar," came the reply as the officers hurried away to their posts. We were now little more than a bowshot away from the line of ships barring the way, when one of them pulled away and began to leave its other two companions at speed, heading back in the direction from which they had come. "They're leaving us, Dominus. No doubt to warn the other ships," said Nicanor. "This is true, Master Navius," said Honorius, "but it does keep the odds in our favor." He looked at the retreating ship. "They will be returning to bring their mates with them like vultures. We will have a hornet's nest in a few days. They would look to bottle us up in the harbor. We still do not know whether the king of this place, whoever he is, will allow us to shelter here and anger these pirates. But we shall see." We were now easily within arrow-shot, but the trireme was still marking its time, facing us head-on. "Watch out now, Master Navius," Honorius shouted. "They will maneuver to ram us at an oblique angle. We must watch carefully and steer the opposite way at the last possible moment, coming back to rub along the starboard side of the trireme, aiming to break their oars like a line of sticks. Can you do this?" Honorius seized Nicanor's shoulders, his eyes flashing. "Aye, Dominus. It'll be tight, but we'll show them our seamanship." Now things seemed to be moving in slow motion. The Minerva steered straight towards the trireme. The trireme stood its ground, its bronze ram parting the waves, threatening to impale us. The trireme's oars moved in unison to mark time and maintain station. The companion galley to the trireme, a much smaller bireme, pulled off to the port, its oars heaving mightily, like centipede legs maneuvering to attack the Minerva from the side. At more than 5 boat lengths from the trireme, at Honorius' signal, the steersman shifted the large steering oars, sending the Minerva on a starboard tack. The trireme took the bait and began to maneuver towards the Minerva, intending to catch her starboard front quarter with her ram. But in an instant, two things happened in quick succession. First, at a signal from Honorius, the scorpion bolt throwers at the front of the Minerva were let loose. The bolts skewered the trireme's steersmen, killing them instantly. Immediately, the trireme lost its helm. Its oarsmen were thrown into confusion. The trireme yawed uncontrollably. A volley from the Minerva's tower archers showered arrows onto its deck, killing a slew of warriors, the pilot and its commander. Nicanor shouted commands to his steersmen, and the Minerva swung right, no more than 2 boat lengths from the trireme's bow. In an instant, the Minerva's high prow was grinding along the trireme's port side, shattering the triple line of oars in rapid succession, like straws, as the two ships ground together. Further commands were now shouted. The legionnaires on deck rushed to the Minerva's bow and let loose volley after volley of javelins, arrows, and darts, until not a single warrior remained standing on the trireme's upper deck. The Minerva groaned as it ground along the trireme's hull, breaking the last of its oars, leaving the warship without any on its starboard side, commanderless and helpless in the water. "Well done, Master Navius," shouted Honorius. The Minerva ground clear of the trireme, leaving it drifting and wallowing to the stern. "Throw the oil pots." The ballistae swiveled around to the stern and let loose a volley of the pots, which smashed on the hull of the galley, coating it with the oil mixture. Honorius cupped his hands and shouted to Callias at the prow of the ship, "Now, Tribune, release the fires of Vulcan." Fire arrows were now let loose on the hapless vessel, utterly unable to do anything, turning sideways to the wind, wallowing in the swells, and getting in the way of its smaller companion. The fire arrows arced across the distance and found their mark, igniting the oil from the smashed clay pots. The mixture of oil, pitch, bitumen, and sulfur flashed into blue-green flames. On the helpless trireme, sailors below began jumping into the water, but the flammable oils floating on the surface caught fire, engulfing anyone in the vicinity. The smaller galley, no doubt dispirited at the disastrous fate of its larger companion, now scurried away, rowing at full speed. The crew and legionnaires aboard the Minerva roared with joy. They threw up their arms, tossed their helmets in the air, shouting at the top of their voices, "Hail! Hail! Hail Honorius!" They began stamping their feet and clashing their shields in unison, chanting, "Imperator! Imperator!" Honorius stood at the rail of the stern deck and held up his arms. The cries of the crew and the legionnaires subsided. "Master Nicanor," shouted Honorius, so all could hear, "do we have some of that excellent Phalarian wine stored away somewhere on this ship?" "Do you mean from your private stock? From vines grown on your own estates on the slopes of Mount Falernum in Campania? You mean that excellent wine aged in your own storehouses for 10 to 20 years, answered Nicanor, smiling broadly. He climbed down from his chair of authority on deck and began striding forth and raising his hands over his head, palms out, dancing as he said this. "That very one, my friend. Break out the amphorae. Let every man on this ship fill their cup. Let us toast the gods and pour our libations, for this day we have opened the way." The legionnaires stamped their feet, shouting and singing. Sailors climbed the rigging, furling the mainsail, as the line of Roman ships steered towards the great port city of Barbaricum on the banks of the great estuary. The soldiers and sailors fetched half a dozen amphorae and began pouring out the amber-colored wine into eagerly held cups. They filled them, pouring libations to Neptune, and drained the rest in great gulps, only to ask for more. All the while, the line of ships, mainsails now furled, entered the sheltered waters of the estuary. Honorius strode to the bowsprit of the Minerva, followed by Nicanor, Strabo, and Callias. They stood at the rail, surveying the city in front of them. "Dominus," said Nicanor, "it's too close to sunset. We do not know these waters. The moon will not be up for a few hours yet. The winds are lessening. We dare go no further towards the port at this time. The men are feasting. The crew is tired. Let us drop anchor here in these sheltered waters." "Aye, Master Navius, this is sound advice indeed. See that it is done. The men have earned a rest. Tomorrow will be the next test of our luck." Nicanor ran off and busied himself giving orders to drop anchor. The line of corvettes behind the Minerva followed suit, and so it was that the 10-ship trade fleet now dropped anchor in a row, facing an unknown reception at Barbaricum. "What fate awaits us now?" whispered Sophia, gazing at the city in the distance. The sun was just above the horizon in the western sky. The stern lamps of the ships were lit. Lights from thousands of windows in the town began to wink on in the twilight. "No challenges, my lady," said Honorius. "And a new revelation, Dominus, and a reckoning about our pasts and future," I said to him, pointedly. A surprise flashed across Honorius's face for an unguarded moment. He looked anxiously at me and then at Sophia. Then he regained control and set his handsome features into that hard, inscrutable mask, hiding his thoughts and emotions. "Why, Lady Camilla, what have you done?" was all he said, with a hint of a threat in his voice. Sophia could not sleep. all that night. After tossing and turning with thoughts of her mother, she finally surrendered and rose from her bed and ascended the steps to the stern deck. The ship's lamps cast a golden glow over the calm waters. The night watch patrolled the decks, walking back and forth, fully alert, eyes trying to pierce the shadows for any movement. Sophia looked to the front of the Minerva, to the bowsprit, and saw the hunched figure of Honorius standing at the rail, looking at the lights of the port in the distance. The air was still, and a half moon had just risen above the eastern horizon, spinning its silvery threads of light over the gently undulating waters. A light mist rose from the water in the bay, rising above them and obscuring the stars. Sophia slipped beside Honorius. He sighed and looked down at the dark waters lapping against the ship. "You know," was all he said. "Yes," whispered Sophia. "You must despise me." Sophia put her hand on his hunched shoulder. He turned to her and grasped her hands between his. "Cara Philosophia," he said. He gently kissed her hands, and then, bowing, held them to his forehead. "Every time I see you, every time I am in your presence, you pierce me to the heart with sorrow and joy. You are so much like her," he said. "It is well that Camilla has told you. Too many secrets have been kept. It is time to let them go. Time for a clean start. Here, so far away." He choked back tears. He raised his eyes and caressed her face. "I want you in my life, Cara Philosophia. I swore an oath to your gentle mother to protect you. I am your pater familias, my child. You should never want for anything, nor fear ever being alone again. When we return to Italy, I will adopt you as my own." Sophia looked deeply into his eyes. "Pater, most beloved, I am already your daughter. Would that not just complicate things? Would that just not start tongues wagging again? Would that not put you under suspicion?" Honorius sighed. "Then what are we to do?" "Bear our burdens silently, but knowing the truth between us, holding on to it," she said. Honorius nodded. "Wisdom and beauty, Cara Philosophia, do your mother credit. But I have you to thank for my education, Father," said Sophia, kissing him on the cheek. "For that I do thank you. My life would have been different." They stood together silently for a long time. Sophia broke the silence. "What was she like, Father?" Honorius took a deep breath and turned to Sophia. "She had a gentle, generous spirit that shimmered like the sun on a clear day. She had an appealing softness, a lightness of touch, an elegance. She was completely unaware of her own beauty. In her innocence was power, for it would bring the fiercest of wolves to bay." Honorius bowed his head. "And I was a wolf in those days, an all-consuming beast, full of myself in the full bloom of my prowess," he sighed. "But she touched my soul like a burning torch. I would have gladly died for her, as she was prepared to sacrifice herself for me. He looked up to Sophia's face shining in the moonlight. And out of those flames, you were brought into this world, Caras Philosophia, to illuminate it. Pater, if we are to leave our secrets behind us, tell me truthfully, did you send Adam away from me? Honorius stiffened, breaking the tender moment between them like shards of glass. In the moonlight, Sophia could see his face harden. He resumed the mask of command. My lady, he was not suitable for you. I told you what happened. He threw his lot in with that Scythian queen. You must forget him. I cannot forget him, Pater. He burns in my soul like my mother burned in yours. Will I see him ever again? Tell me, I beg you. For a moment, just a moment, Honorius softened, his eyes gleaming, but it was gone in an instant. Dominus, cried a sentry, look at the city. The sound of trumpets and drums pierced the still night air. In the distant town, a long line of torches moved down unseen roads towards the waterfront. There were many of them, a mass movement, marching by torchlight. The clanking of arms and the neighing of horses and the faint shouts of command echoed through the still night air. Honorius turned to the sentry. Double the guard, signal the other ships to stand at arms. Music for Chapter 2. From Epidemic Sound, The Odyssey Ahead by Dream Cave. For Queen and Country by Bonnie Grace. Beat to Quarters by Bonnie Grace. For Survival by Bonnie Grace. Be with the Tribe by Bonnie Grace. Last Hero Standing by Dream Cave. Myth. The Smoke Clears by Wendell Scherer. Choirs of War by Dream Cave. From Dan Phillipson, All Around Us. From Twins Music, Dandelion Field. From Alexander Vassinen, Necropole. From Vital, Stomp. From Ben Sound, Epic. Archangel Chronicles 2 by Raymond Collodi. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved.